Okay, I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting to order today for meeting at Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021. First item on the agenda is roll call.
Miller,
Here.
Rosado,
Here.
Beck,
Here.
Knott, Chanzit, Barron,
Here.
Wolf,
Here.
O'Brien,
Here.
Callahan,
Here.
Meitzler,
Here.
Malay,
Here.
Ewer,
Here.
Cerrone,
Here.
and McFadden. We have 11 out of 14.
Okay, thank you. Next up on the agenda is a reminder to speak directly into your microphone or whatever you're using for this tonight, for the recording and for the broadcast tonight. Items to be removed, added, or changed. Do we have anything? Nothing tonight? Do we have anybody from the public that would like to speak this evening? Or anybody online?
Okay, see if you are listening and you would like to speak on a matter not on the agenda, if you could raise your hand. And no one is raising their hand.
Okay, we'll move on then to the consent agenda. Tonight's one item. Item A, approval of the Cow Executive Session minutes for February 2nd, 2021. Anybody have any comments or corrections? Can I get a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion by O'Brien, second by Ewer. Roll call, please.
O'Brien,
Aye.
Callahan,
Aye.
Meitzler,
Aye.
Malay,
Aye.
Ewer,
Aye.
Cerrone,
Aye.
McFadden, absent, Miller,
Aye.
Rosado,
Aye.
Beck,
Aye.
Knott, absent, Chanzit, absent, Barron,
Aye.
and Wolf.
Aye.
Motion carried 11-0.
All right, thank you. Okay, up next is item number 6, which is Resolution 21-28-R, approving execution of contract with Hoare Construction Incorporated for sanitary sewer pipelining. Do you have anything on this, Gary, or do you want to go through any?
I can just do a very brief summary.
Okay,
This is
thank
for lining of our city's sanitary sewers and storm sewers. This is really a preventative maintenance and a rehabilitation type project. This gives sewers new life. Jeremy references in his memo here, along Main Street, the sewers are 100+ years old. So by doing this pipelining, we would hope to get another 50 to 75 years out of them. So, and there's really no reason why it can't go that long. Anyways, the bids did come in extremely well. We partnered with St. Charles, and the bids came in about 14.7% below the engineer's estimate. On page 2, it does talk about the funds, where this project is being funded from, both on the general fund drainage side and on the enterprise fund sanitary sewer side. Jeremy broke it down in there to say the budget amounts plus the contingency amounts. We are recommending the full $180,000 for the general fund budget, the drainage side, which is what's budgeted. We have extra sections of pipe in town that we certainly can line, given the favorable bid pricing. And the recommendation then is to award to Hoyer Construction for an amount not to exceed $734,618.90.
Okay, does anybody have any questions, comments on this? I know we've done this for quite a while and, really, I think saved us a lot of money on replacement rather than replacing, but relining them.
Yep.
And it's a pretty interesting process too to have that done.
Maybe 5 or 6 years in a row now we've done this.
Well, there's no open cut.
Yep.
So there's no, any traffic congestion. I mean, they just access it through the structures in the road, the manhole structures. So it's pretty, for them, not that simple, but it is, for us, it's pretty
Low
simple.
impact to the traveling public and to the
Right.
residents. Yep,
And a good benefit.
and a
Yes.
great benefit, yep.
Was there any specific reason why it came so far under budget?
Alderman Wolf and I just briefly talked about that before the meeting.
Okay.
We did get fantastic prices this year. We just had a lot of quantity, so we had a
Right.
really, really high amount of quantity, and we partnered with St. Charles, and it just is the bid environment this year. I can't explain, I don't know a specific percentage, like how much we saved by partnering with them, but, you know,
Yeah, it
let's
worked
go
out for the
adage, we're
better,
not gonna-
yes.
We're not gonna look the gift horse, you know.
Economies
We're
of
happy
scale.
about that. It's good to come in under budget.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to make note too, that, so people know that we had 5 people bid the project.
Yes,
And so we went with the most qualified, or the best qualified,
and the lowest, yep.
and the lowest, so.
Okay, any other comments? Can I get a motion on this?
So moved.
By O'Brien,
Second.
second by, is that Rosado?
Rosado.
Okay. Okay, roll call, please.
O'Brien,
Aye.
Callahan, Callahan,
Aye.
Meitzler,
Aye.
Malay,
Aye.
Ewer,
Aye.
Saron,
Aye.
McFadden, absent, Miller,
Aye.
Rosado,
Aye.
Beck,
Aye.
Knopf, absent, Chanzit, absent, Barron,
Aye.
and Wolf.
Aye.
Motion carried 11-0.
Okay, thank you. Up next,
Should we do consent on that?
yeah, we can put that on consent agenda. That's fine. All right, up next is a discussion on amendments to the peddler, solicitor, and food vendor ordinances. You want to take that, Laura?
Sure. So over the past several years, we've received a couple of inquiries regarding food trucks. And one of the things we wanted to do was wait until the food truck, there was a lawsuit filed by some food truck vendors in Chicago against their ordinance. And we kind of wanted to see where all of that was going to shake out. And there finally was a state Supreme Court ruling on that. And so as we move into the season here, we wanted to make sure that we had appropriate regulations in place, both to provide opportunity to have food trucks in our downtown, but also recognizing the impact that food trucks present to our brick and mortar businesses. And I know that Scott Buning provided a nice memo and overview to this, so I will throw it to Scott.
Sure, thank you. Essentially, this is something that Community Development and Police and Administration have been working on for a number of years now. Our old ordinance really became a bit dated and a little unwieldy to deal with, especially in light of, food trucks, the rise of food trucks, and just some of the changes in the laws generally. So right now, our ordinance is a two-part ordinance. It's either peddlers or solicitors, and the peddlers ordinance is kind of where we had regulated food trucks and mobile vendors before. So we felt that it would be appropriate to split that out as a separate category. And police have been doing all of these licensing for peddlers, solicitors, and then any kind of food truck. But, some of the food trucks really get into more zoning and siting related things that police really, weren't equipped to regulate. So we felt that it would be appropriate to move that more or less under the Community Development Department. So this is actually a three-part ordinance. The first part addresses peddlers. This would still be administered by the police department for anybody that wants to sell goods from place to place or house to house. The food vendors, like I said, would be specifically excluded from that and regulated in Article C. There would be background checks for those types of people that want to peddler's license. They can't. There are certain regulations if they're vending stuff from a truck that they can't, do it from the traffic lane, and they can't use sound amplification. and there's limitations on where they can be in relation to school, and that was a request of the school district actually during our discussions. They wanted to have some setback from their facilities, just so that they didn't have kids running to and from there as part of that. The second section relates to residential soliciting. This is for those that are seeking to get donations or orders for goods or services. It would also be administered by the police department as a regulation that they would handle. It does not include anything that is more or less a First Amendment right. So if somebody's seeking an opinion or political petitions for any cause, whether it be a political election or just a cause, those would not be subject to the soliciting ordinance. Those are First Amendment right that would be excluded from that. Anybody that does obtain a soliciting license would have to do also a background check. There are time limits in that ordinance for activities. And then anybody that's convicted of a felony cannot have a license as long as it's been less than 5 years since they were convicted. Residents can also obtain no solicitors signs to prevent solicitors from going to their homes. The third section is brand new. It relates to food vendors. We've had a lot of food vendors, and as I mentioned earlier, most of them have been, kind of handled through the peddler's licensing, and it's not been a very clear process that we've had through that. So we wanted to clarify that and create some more specific regulations for that. While it's written right now, the police department would be handling it. After discussion, we think it'd be more appropriate for community development, community and economic development to handle that. So we would take that over. Police would still do the background checks for that, but we would do the permitting and the processing of any of the licenses for those types of users. There would be there in the ordinance itself, it has specific language about how they can operate, things that they have to have, including waste and sanitary facilities, fire protection if they use any type of heating or cooking facilities in the trucks or their mobile vending device. They also, in this ordinance, is drafted, again, it's not in an ordinance form yet, but it's just, in drafts. And then once we have it, consensus or direction from the council, we will put them into formal ordinance form. But the other issue, the other topic is that they would not be allowed to operate within 200 feet of an existing brick and mortar restaurant. There are some exceptions to that, where if it was for a truck that is operated by the restaurant, they would have the ability to use that near their restaurant. It would be accepting of any special event that we would have. We would be allowed to grant those permits. Also, if a business is not really primarily a restaurant, such as a brew pub, and they don't have any food, they would be able to rent a truck to provide food to that facility as part of the benefit of having that there. So we are proposing these for you for consideration. Like I said, police, community development and administration have reviewed these, and we've hashed them over and made some changes. And we did wait until the courts had settled, and that was primarily in regards to the setback issue. And then I think there was some issue about whether the city could actually regulate them at all. But that's why we wanted to wait before he presented this to you. So that's kind of the summary of it, and we would love to hear any comments, questions, or changes you'd like to have before we put this in a formal ordinance form.
Anybody have any questions on this? I guess I had one. I thought when I read through this the first time that there was a comment or a line in here about how close the vending carts or whatever could be to each other. My only question there would be, like, for the farmer's market, is that not part of this as an ordinance?
Yeah, that's a special event. So we would,
okay. And that's what I wanted to know, because I was gonna say, then they'd have real issues trying to put them at opposite ends of the layout there. So, okay. That's really the only one that I had. I'm glad that we're doing it and we're getting this separated out and actually listed there, because I know in other communities, I've talked to a couple of people that have used food vendors to come in, say a little microbrewery or something, and how they had to do different things with them, either have it catered and not have it as a food truck, so that way they could stay for a certain amount of time when they were doing an event. So I know that this is good that we actually have all of our regulations down in one place that hopefully will make it easy for somebody that wants to do stuff like this. Because I think it has its place and it does provide things that I think we want to have.
Ellen?
Let Marty go.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question regarding the background investigation for the food vendors. Do we do that for any of the restaurant owners? I didn't understand the rationale why we would have those restrictions in place for a food vendor.
And I would say that the reason why is because these are kind of transient merchants. They're not, staying in the same place necessarily all the time. So, I think there was some concern about, who is doing that and whether we should have some, additional background on these. I mean, I'm not saying that there is something like this, but, sometimes some of these people have some unsavory backgrounds that, we may not want them to be driving in our neighborhood, selling things. So I think that's part of the reason why they wanted to have some type of background check on those as well.
Alan?
Hold on a second, Abby, you're next after Mark.
Yeah, Scott, is the caution children crossing, is that something that's normally on a food truck? I've never really paid attention, or I can see that for an ice cream truck, but I just wasn't sure if that was something that's normally there.
Yeah, and I think that really relates more to the ice cream trucks because they're actually driving around. I mean, the food truck is going to be mobile, or stationary most likely. So we can look at that and see if that we should amend that.
Okay, Abby?
Scott, my question was about the 200 feet setback from packaged goods stores. So this would be Walgreens, Berkeley's, if anybody was in the boardwalk shops that sold packaged goods. Is that consistent with other ordinances? And what's the reasoning behind the packaged good part?
Again, it has to do with the competition of a brick and mortar store selling similar goods. So you're going to have like a certain stores are going to sell pre-prepared foods, or like especially convenience stores. They're going to sell packaged goods and things that you can buy and eat from there. So I think that's the idea behind that was to avoid the competition between those two different types of uses.
But again, Scott, that would not apply in the case where it was like an event that was happening. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
It's just where the food truck were to roll in on its own.
Right.
I have one more question. Would any of these vendors be able to have a liquor license for a food truck? Not that I want the margarita truck in my neighborhood, but just to ask the question.
That's a good question, because I don't know that we've granted liquor licenses to anything that's mobile.
Right. We wouldn't have a liquor license
Okay.
now, I think, that applied to that.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to make sure, because I think that's something that we also should at least make sure people know that that's not part of doing that. I mean, yes, you could park in front of a place that sells
That
liquor.
sells liquor, that has
but-
its own license.
Right, and then that would be incumbent on that liquor license holder to say, okay, if I want to, make a parklet in my parking lot and turn that into an event, how would they handle that? And
Right.
then that would require that to happen.
We do have 7 attendees this evening.
Mm-hmm.
Is now an appropriate time to see if any of them have comment?
Do you have any comments, Your Honor? Okay, does anybody else online on the council have any comments before we turn it over to public comment?
Alan,
Go
it's
ahead,
Marty
Marty.
again. Yeah, just back along the lines of the background check for especially for the item barring for the felony. As there's been changes to obviously some of the marijuana possession and those kind of laws, do we have anything else that bars any licensure for felonies? I mean, obviously probably liquor license, but
Yes.
anything along those lines? Because if we do bar somebody for a felony and they've already served their time, and it's over, do we have any exceptions to it? I'm just kind of, I mean, I understand if maybe there are some sex offender ones that would probably be good to have background checks. But if there was a theft conviction when the person was 18 and, you know, something along those lines, and they're now 50 and they've changed their life around, would we bar those in kind of those circumstances?
Yeah,
And-
so to answer the first part of your question, in the Body Works licenses, I believe we also have that similar language in there as well. So
Okay.
if somebody is a convicted felon for that, they are barred. In this, we did put language that it's only for the first 5 years after the conviction. So if 5 years has passed after their conviction, then they are eligible to apply for a license.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's actually, it says here under the state of Illinois laws or any federal laws, that I think we're trying to follow that in here. Anybody else on the council? Mark?
Are we considering second Fridays to be a special event?
It would be part of the application. So yes, if the organization that was hosting a second Friday event made that part of their special event application.
I agree.
Okay. Yeah, just because I think that's where these things can benefit the most is from events. But because otherwise at 200 feet, there's nothing downtown that would happen unless it was a special event. So I don't know if that's something that the food trucks are looking to do, is to be involved in more things. But that's the only concern I have, is that restriction gets pretty tight if somebody wants to do something. So.
And just so you know, the map that I included, it's a little bit dated because it was when we had drafted that earlier. So it includes some restaurants that are no longer there, and then there are some new restaurants that are there, but it's just representation to show you the kind of the setbacks there with the 200 foot.
Okay, I think we'll open up to the public, so if there's anybody that has their hand up, Laura, if you want to manage
If
that.
anyone, member of the public who is on this meeting would like to speak on this topic, if you could hit the raise your hand. There are none.
Okay. So do we have consensus that I really don't hear anything that we want to change in that? We can just move it through as an ordinance and bring it back to us, cleaned up and ready to go. And you'll have the changes where you, Scott, where you separate out what's the responsibility of the police department, what's responsibility of community development, economic development.
Yeah, basically the food truck part will be community development, though the police would do the background check part of it. And then the solicitors and peddlers would be police.
Yeah.
So we'll clarify that.
And I think when you get to the food vendor or truck vendor thing, there maybe should be a line just, as a caution that alcohol sales are not, possible through a food truck. So that, just so that they know that it would be incumbent on somebody else to get that license to do that, if they wanted to do an event with that.
We'll do that.
Okay. Well, that was easy.
Took us a while to get through it, but we got
I
it.
know it wasn't easy for you. That's not what I mean, Scott. That's not what I mean.
Took 2 administrators and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Been working on it for 5 years.
Well, it's a good thing that we're getting that done. Not that they weren't busy doing other things in the meantime, so. Okay, then I think we'll move right on to item number 9, which is project status.
Or
number
8.
Oh, I'm sorry, I already scratched off number 8 because I was ready to do that. Number 8.
Gary's like, yes, let's
I'm
go.
trying to ignore that, $18 billion elephant in the room, the CEJA legislation update,
Yes.
which Gary just keeps finding more and more and more great news about for us. You want to?
Yeah, I can start, but I mean, again, this really probably is a discussion amongst the committee as to, what the city's positions are going to be. I created and sent to the committee, starting with a bullet point, very one sentence, and then going into paragraphs, and then ultimately gave you the line by line I don't know if you want to start with the talking points, the bullet points, and I highlighted those things which truly are like city positions or city opinions, which those are the things that, obviously these are in draft form, and those are the things that the committee would need to decide. What are the city's positions and what are the city's, thoughts on this?
And the reason being just that the legislation in its current form contains provisions that would have some serious impacts on the city. And so while, ordinarily we would not take that step of having a resolution with adopted positions on things, here where the impacts are so great, it's something that as a council you may want to consider.
Yeah, I think, I've been here from where this all started when we decided to get into the Prairie State deal. That one of the things I think we need to do is just list out what, in its current form, what that would really mean to this city. If it's 2 million, the rough estimate of a couple of $1 million more if we're forced to go out and buy, wind and solar power on top of what we already are contracted to pay for, to meet those requirements, that gets thrown right onto the ratepayers. I don't think that that's the intent of the legislatures, their desire of what they want to do.
No.
But I think that that is a definite consequence if it goes through the way it is. This, is something that I think we really need to be united on how we present that to, in the whatever form we send to the state, that we have to be included in those discussions to get legislation that doesn't hurt every person that lives in Batavia and everybody else that's in NIMPA and all the other municipalities that are in the same position we're in. Maybe not as big a dollars, maybe bigger, they're all different, but it's going to affect all of us. And I think part of that is they have to take that into consideration, because that's, to me, not a big enough percentage of that plant to have real force when you go back to the state with it. So we have to be pretty loud about what we want to say to them, because we're a small voice in that whole deal. The other thing I think is very interesting to me is I think immediately, no matter what they do, they're going to get challenged because it affects municipalities and ratepayers outside the state of Illinois. So I think if the state of Illinois tries to do this, I think immediately it's going to end up in court, because it does affect so many people outside the state. So I think that's the real kind of interesting question out there. How does that happen and how does that delay it? But regardless of that, I think we have to be right up front and, first, if we can be, to say, don't do this to us, and here are the reasons why, and just go through and list all those out. As simplistic as we can with that. And I don't know that they have an answer or anybody's ever put up, well, if we, delay it, make yours only 10% of what everybody else is, and make it in 5-year steps getting closer to where we want everybody to be. I don't know if that even really helps us. It just delays how long it's going to take us to get there, to get over that. And I still think, I don't see a federal bailout coming for us to get out of this plant. Now, that could change in a couple of years, I don't know. But I don't think we wait at all for that. I think we have to address what's out there right now and try and stop it or modify it before it gets passed.
Alan?
Marty, go ahead.
Yeah, and so that we know exactly what our position would or would not be, it's going to be dependent on, like you had kind of started out laying it out. I think we need to know exactly what, in its current forms, the impacts to the city are going to be, and whether or not those can be modified. As far as putting out a position statement on it and either trying to stop it or not, I think we also have to look at the amount of, just in my research of trying to find all the arguments for it, the pros, the proponent side is about 10-1 to the anti side. So there's a lot of pro support behind it in the community. Also, because while this does affect us on the micro level, on the larger macro level, there are people that are more concerned with how this affects climate change and the discussion with fossil fuels, et cetera. So some people may say, yes, we're sorry that it might affect you and your town individually, but collectively, this is another issue that needs to be looked at. So I think there is a lot of discussion that probably needs to be taken before we decide what we would do on something like that. But regardless of it, the state may act whether we are for it or opposed to it. So I think the responsible thing to do would be act as if this may happen and lay out what the potential consequences of it are, and if there are any opportunities to modify those impacts to us.
Yeah, and I really think that that's the thing we have to do is, you know, we can't wait to see what they do. We have to be proactive and start figuring out, you know, how do we react? If we don't get any modifications to it and it happens, how do we come back and, you know, tell our constituency that, you know, we're going to add to $4 million, whatever the number ends up being, onto their bills every year. I'd be as nervous about what it will do to our industrial area as what it would do to our residential.
And we want to make sure that those legislators who are going to be voting on this bill understand exactly what the impacts will be to our ratepayers as well.
And I think it's really important that that may also be a good thing for us to have and give to the public so that we can get the public to understand what this means. It's great to say, and I'm totally in support of us getting away from fossil fuels, but you have to have a plan to get there and not just say, we're going to do this and you're going to have to figure it out.
Right.
I mean, that's one of the things that was one of the nightmares with this plant to begin with, you know, at Prairie State, was they had no idea what the standard was going to be for, you know, sulfur and carbon dioxide removal. And then halfway through, well, we can never achieve that. Well, you have to, because we said you have to. And then it just keeps going. The cost kept going up. So, you know, I think that, yes, we need to discuss this and we need to figure out how we want to, you know, position ourselves going forward on it. But I don't think we should wait very long. I mean, I think this is something we have to get done, you know, quickly. And I think we also have to get that out to the public quickly.
I think,
Abby? I'm just looking at who's unmuted. Go ahead, Abby.
I lost my train of thought. Where was I going to start? There's so many things. Come back to me. I got to remember it.
Okay, Mike?
so Gary, we have basically like 21 years to be clear of it.
30, oh, yeah,
December of 41.
December.
Yeah.
41, so it's about 21 years, right? And so I think we can make that, you know. I think we've learned a valuable lesson as a city to diversify, for certain. And we tried diversifying about 8 years ago, and we couldn't do that because we just couldn't afford it. And it was a good thing we didn't do that, because it was going to be a bust out in Rochelle. And there was a lot of push to do that. I think I really applaud you for bringing this to our attention. I mean, this is important stuff. It's major stuff. But, you know, a couple of articles and things I've been reading is, you know, our fleet of atomic energy, so to speak, our electric generators, the average age is 45 years old. And they're starting to decommission our nuclear reactors now for that reason. The demand now, from what I've read, some research papers I've read, was to 2023, 2024, the demand for coal is still going to be climbing. And it's at 2050, the demand for coal will have dropped, this is nationwide, but will have dropped 11%. So I think with the decommissioning of the nuclear, and I'm not trying to diminish what's in front of us, but, you know, just give another look at it, at where we're at, is that, you know, especially with Prairie State, at the clean system that they have there. It's one of the cleanest in the state, and we have that study that we're a part of at Prairie State, that if they have any success in that, you know, the coal is part of a diversification for anyone to be a part of then. The cost of gas is rising, the cost of fuel is rising, and so we're never going to be at that break point that we always thought about in 2012. You know, but it is beneficial to us that it is going up. And so I personally don't think coal is just going to get kicked to the side of the road in 5 years. I mean, there's too many jobs at stake, too much money at stake, as you said in the talking points. You know, there's billions of dollars. And when they took away that pipeline, that was big stuff, and a lot of jobs got lost. We can't afford to lose, really, jobs here in Illinois anyway. So I think our representatives will be siding with coal, as we all want to diversify and go into clean energy. I mean, it's cheap energy, you know, wind, but they have other things that they still need to come up with. I mean, they need to come up with storage for wind power. I mean, that's a technology that they're working on, but they haven't come to yet. And so they're big things, and that are still lying in front of the sustainable power generators, you know, wind and solar. These are big things that they're still trying to get, so they're consistent, and they don't have that yet. So I think that this is excellent that you bring this forward, but I don't think it's all gloom and doom yet. I mean, we're still in a tough spot just because we're in Prairie State. We're in NIMPA that's in Prairie State. And so we have ownership through NIMPA, and it's a tough spot to be in, but we've been dealing pretty well with it. I think NIMPA has been doing well with the costing of it, and I guess financing it any further could be difficult. But I don't think it's all gloom and doom. But I do, again, applaud you for bringing it to us. But I just want to put a more positive spin on where we're at than the sky is falling.
Alderman Beck has her hand up.
Ready, Abby?
Yeah, I'm ready. Sorry about
On
that.
track?
I was thinking about what you were saying, Alan, about, you know, exactly what this means to the ratepayers and having a really, you know, well-educated guess on what CEJA might mean for our ratepayers. You know, the RMI report says that it's going to be better for the Batavia ratepayers and for the ratepayers of Prairie State. And being able to present that, and I know that we want to get a conversation going and a robust conversation going quickly. I don't think we can be too transparent when it comes to Prairie State, given kind of the feelings out there in the public about it. I know that the authors of the RMI report, and then there's a local Tri-Cities, you know, a Prairie State group that has been heavily involved in researching and understanding the legislation and understanding the impacts that it would be to these communities. They do want to come and present to us, and weren't available tonight in time for this meeting, but would like to come next week and answer any questions that we might have about the CEJA legislation, about the RMI report, the authors themselves. And so I think I know that I still need a lot of time to digest all of Gary's documents as well, because there was a lot there. And thank you, Gary, for all the time that you put into outlining those points. But I definitely think perhaps we could even just continue this into next week so that we can wrap our heads around it and have a really big discussion about it.
I would second that.
Yeah, if we can get, you know, other people that have been, you know, heavily into this in here to discuss with us what they've written about this, I think that would be a good thing. You know, I still look at it, and I think in the end, yes, I think it will be better for our ratepayers. but between now and then, it's like double paying for it. It's like having the supply or having a car that sits in the garage and you gotta go out and buy another one to drive back and forth to work. Because you're still paying for the first one, but you gotta drive the other one. That's.
Yeah, but we're still paying for the first one, even though we're paying for the first plant and buying energy from that plant. And under this one, they're saying that buying the new plant would still be cheaper plus the energy than, blah, 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 blah. Never mind.
Well, I don't see how we get out of paying for what we've got at Prairie State. That just doesn't go away. So no matter where the energy comes from in the future, until we pay off the debt we owe for Prairie State, we are still paying that. So any other energy source we have is over and above what we're paying for Prairie State.
Right, and that was taken into account in the RMI report.
Right, just to be clear, I mean, we have 55 megawatts that we have to pay for every year. We don't use that. So what we're not using, we're selling back to the market for less than what the market value is. And so we're losing money. And so we got 21 more years to stay with coal. After that's up, we can remove ourselves from Prairie State, from NIMPA, and we can then diversify. Right now, diversifying doesn't help us because we don't need the power. We have the power. And so that's really what it comes down to. We have 21 years to deal with this, unless we can get rid of the power.
But if the plant shut down and the power went away, then we wouldn't be paying for that power anymore. We'd be paying to decommission it, we'd be paying off our bonds, but we wouldn't be paying the operating expenses or to burn that coal.
That's correct. We don't want the plant to shut down. We want to burn coal.
I think at this point, until we have a clearer idea of how that could happen, I think we have to figure out how we get to that point, because I don't think that this legislation is gonna pass and they're gonna shut that plant down. I think that has to be a staged, phased out plan to get rid of that. And if we shut down nuclear plants in the state, I don't see how they can shut Prairie State down, because we won't have baseload generation. Wind and solar do not generate baseload power. So.
The nuclear does.
Right, and,
We have nuclear.
well, they're talking about shutting it down.
Yeah, they're in the process of decommissioning Allison, which is right across.
Yeah, but I don't think I think worked into the CEGIP plan is how much nuclear is going to be available, given all that other legislation.
Yeah, and that's why I think we need to have all of that in front of us as we figure out what we want to say or what we want to do moving forward with this. And again, we don't have a whole lot of time to make those decisions, because, if this gets passed in its current form, then we have to figure out how we pay double, or how we pay additional until that plant shuts down. Because we'll be forced to go out and buy other power while we still are under contract to buy more than we need now.
Right.
Hey, Alan, this is Drew. I think you kind of hit on the key thing there, which is if this happens, we're going to be forced to pay for power and buy additional power elsewhere. And we're kind of looking at it through the lens of this legislation right in front of us, whether it's this legislation or legislation in 2 years. I think we have to operate under the expectation that some version of this legislation is inevitable. And what our primary objective should be is to help the people that are drafting the legislation and voting on the legislation understand the impact of it and work with us to find a solution which gets them to their end goal, which is eliminating coal power, but to do it in such a way that they're not skewering ratepayers in Batavia and elsewhere in the state and in 3 or 4 or 5 or however many other states. I think a lot of the people that are writing this don't quite understand what the whole scope of what they're hoping to do is. And I think we need to work with them to help them understand that and to craft a solution that gets them to their goal, but also doesn't put us and others like us in a serious jam.
And I
whether
would
it's
like
this
to take,
legislation or something in the future, we got to look at it like this is an inevitable situation, not a will this piece pass or not pass.
and I would just like to take time to recognize the state legislators who have been willing to meet with Gary and I at this point and sit down and try to go through these details and understand what the impacts would be. And we're very grateful for their time in doing so, and they welcome follow-up as well. So we will have an opportunity to bring, I think you've crafted a very good strategy here for us right now to understand exactly what the impacts are and have that with them as they consider passage of this legislation.
And I think Drew's exactly right. This is gonna happen. It's
Yeah,
just
in
how
some
soon and
Shape
how,
or form.
how drastic it is. It's gonna happen. Your Honor? Go ahead.
Yeah, I certainly subscribe to what's been said here tonight. Gary Holmes done a very good job, I think, in trying to alert the council as to what the potentials are here. I guess what I'm thinking, and Laura and I talked about this a little bit this afternoon, I really think that, you know, we got a little time to talk here, but we don't have a lot of time. But in the meantime, I think we need to kind of make sure we're all educated up on this whole thing and understand where it's going. Then I would like to suggest that the council invite at least the state senator and the 2 representatives from Batavia to come in here on probably a committee night, and just let's have a night, not a screaming, hollering, you know, but get their sense of where they feel this thing is going and why they feel that way. So there's a clear public understanding then as to where this thing seems to be going. Because Alan brought up some very good points about how this thing is probably going to work out. And I think there's probably a need to make sure that the legislation allows for some of this stuff to work itself out that doesn't have this adverse impact on all of the ratepayers and the industries and everybody else that's out there that could be hit pretty hard by this if in fact it goes forward in the current form. So, you know, the word I get is that not our legislators, but the Illinois General Assembly in actuality is moving kind of slow this year. They're not really heading for a record number of pieces of legislation. And I would think that there's going to be some time between now and the end of the session when we at least can get the 3 of them in here, maybe one at a time or all 3 of them together, however it works out, and at least have a public conversation with them about where this is all going. Because I think it would be, number one, tremendously beneficial to the council. And I think that the legislators themselves, because they're the ones who may be making the vote, certainly owe it to the community of Batavia and the people that are paying the bill as to why they're going to do their vote the way they are going to do, whatever that vote may be.
And I think, in a lot of respects, I think a lot of this is things that a lot of the people can agree on. In the end, that's where we want to be. We want to have a very diversified portfolio. You want to have a lot of renewable energy. You want to have, you know, the latest and greatest technologies in it. And I think overall in the U.S. for the last probably 40 or 50 years, they really haven't pushed that in the electric industry. It was whatever made them money during that time is what the big power companies did. They didn't worry about their infrastructure. They didn't worry about, you know, how they were going to step into the next phase of whatever was the next power generation field that came up and worked. And they never really got to that point. And they were never pushed by the federal government to get there. Now, in the last 10 years, that's been a different story. There's been a lot of things that were pushed and talked about, and a lot of, you know, when the wind power stuff really came up to begin with, it was all subsidized, and it was a really good-looking deal on paper because it was subsidized. Well, now, I don't know that that's going to happen. And I think that's one of the things that this whole CEJA plan scares me about is I don't know that there's any money out there to subsidize this changeover, to accelerate it to the point where it looks like what they've got in this legislation. I think the only way to realistically make it happen is to slow it down and to phase it out slower, especially if we get nuclear plants shut down in the middle of this, because that takes away really, really stable generation for baseload power. And that's where big, big problems happen, like what happens in California and what happened in Texas. You know, that kind of stuff happens when you don't have reliable baseload power. And that's something I don't want to see. Our state's got enough other problems. They don't need to add that to it. And then if you add double paying for power on top of that for, you know, any municipality in the state, you're just at a severe disadvantage to every other state around us. So then the mass exodus continues out of Illinois, and it doesn't get any better. So, I mean, I think those are the kind of the things that we have to drive home with the legislators, that this can be done, and it's not that anybody is against it, it's that we have to be able to get there and not drive people out of our cities, not drive businesses out of our cities, and, you know, have people be able to live here and still enjoy it. You know, I mean, that's the scary thing to me, is this could pass, no problem. And the way our federal government is set up right now, things could change really rapidly. And they could get, the state of Illinois could get help from the federal government as far as, this is the legislation that we're going to follow federally, so you have to do it in Illinois. This might be something we might be fighting in another year in the federal government, changeover like this. So we have to figure out how we can get from where we are today to a very diversified, you know, renewable energy portfolio, and not destroy things between then and now. So that's
Can I jump in?
Go ahead, Nick.
One, I want to say, Drew, you're dead on with the approach we need to take. Plan for the worst, hope for the best. The time frame is the variable we don't know, but it's coming. But more importantly, when we come together, I think we need to move forward relatively quickly with the plan that we've mentioned, as far as getting representatives in here, getting legislators in here to talk and sit down. But we as a council need to come together in a logical way and bring some facts together, because there's some things that I've heard today that are already going against what I learned last week, as far as the RMI report and some of the assumptions. We have a contract. I don't know that we can get out of, I don't think we can get out of, I know the bonds are locked in, but even the commitment, even if they decommission the plant, we have a contract that we have to buy 55 megawatts of power through them, whether it's produced there or not, is my impression. And Gary, you could probably maybe add to that, but it probably is going to take some legal analysis to see what we can get out of it and what not. So I don't want to make any assumptions based on the RMI report that where a crossover is, or what our cost benefit analysis is, or anything like that. We need to get the real facts in front of the council. Another thing is, keep in mind, while the bonds expire in 21 years, who knows? I mean, without legislation and the shutdown of this plant, we are owners. It could go on for a long time beyond that as well. So there are things we really need to learn as a council. We'll have some new members on council in a short order here. So there's a lot to learn before we take positions and certainly get emotions involved in statements before we know what are facts.
Got Alderman Beck has her hand up.
Abby, go ahead.
Sorry about that. Nick really said a lot what I was going to say. Getting the facts in front of us and reviewing the documents that Gary has sent out, and the CEJA reports that are out there as well, to look at the timelines, to look at how things are going to be funded, because that's all outlined in there, how infrastructure improvements are going to be made, the timeline for decommissioning and what's going to be done over the next 10 years before we've decarbonized our power supply, to really take a look at that so that we know, because I think most of those details are out there now. And yeah, getting some understanding too of if Prairie State goes away, what is enforceable in terms of that 55 megawatts is a big one. Because I just keep thinking about my phone bill, and if like Verizon went out of business and I had to get a T-Mobile phone, and then I still had to pay Verizon like for my data plan, just seems really strange to me. So that's the part that I'm having trouble understanding.
Were you gonna ask a question, Mark?
Yeah, I guess it'd probably be repeating most of what everybody said is, yeah, it's a when, not if. So
Right.
we have to plan for that. I honestly think that when is a long time, just because you look at, just doing some math on wind farms. It would, to replace, the amount of wind energy or the amount of, turbines that have to be put up to replace Prairie State is $2.2 billion worth of wind farms. So there's that. I just looked at, on the way back home from vacation, a big Georgia 60 megawatt solar farm they're putting up. Now, that's in Georgia. They get plenty of sun down there. Not extraordinarily expensive. Actually, it's probably about the same price as wind. But to do that same kind of thing to replace what Prairie State has would probably be, my math has it as twice the size of Batavia of solar farm. So we're not there technology-wise that we can just go ahead and turn this off. So I think that's the thing. We're not there yet. But I think everybody agrees we need to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's two parts of it, the financial aspect of it and the fact that technology just doesn't exist to replace it already now.
And I think that's maybe an important thing to kind of point out to our legislators. Maybe they're not even thinking that way. Like, it almost seems like we're gonna shut this down, yet they don't have the source of how we're going to get energy. I mean, it could turn into a Texas because we don't have enough energy to provide everybody. And I think that, you know, when we talk to them, that might be one thing that we want to, you know, as you said, Mark, is what is your plan? Is there enough to service everyone if you're to close this down?
Well, and realize too, the demand is gonna go up. If you look at all the auto manufacturers' plans over the next decade,
Electric?
the electrics that's coming out, the infrastructure grid is gonna be huge. I mean, that was one of the things that, you know, Gary mentioned in one of his memos, was if that's true and this plan passes as is, if we have another municipal parking garage like what's proposed for One North Washington, we would have to electrify that parking garage for chargers. That's a substation. That's one new substation to control a parking lot. So, I mean, that's huge from a municipal standpoint or from a utility standpoint. I mean, because I'm sure that where their investor-owned utilities are, they're gonna be forced to do that, or they're gonna have to set up a rate structure that can support that. You know, and it's gonna be a big change, and Mark's right, it's not gonna happen overnight. And again, with a lot of things, unfunded mandates through any government, a lot of times they look at what the benefit is at the end, and, well, that's great, let's do it. And they forget about, you're here today, you gotta get there tomorrow. That tomorrow has to be a decade away, or, you know, whatever the distance has to be, to make it logically get there without destroying things in between it. So, I mean, that's the thing, I think, especially when we get the legislators in here, that's the thing we have to remind them, is that this isn't just, you know, you can say to ComEd that has how many, you know, multiples of our ratepayers to spread those costs out over. This is a totally different thing when it hits 27,000 people under one utility. So that's to me, a big difference. Marty?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I want to just kind of go back to what I originally said, which was we have not outlined where this impacts us and in what manner and what potential solutions are out there for that. The fact remains is I'm not going to sign off on any letter opposing this legislation carte blanche, because I believe there's a lot of people that may just say, hey, Batavia, we're sorry that you got involved in something that you were warned maybe you shouldn't have, but they're going to say coal's dead. And why are you continuing to kind of double down on coal and think larger picture, which is the environmental and the impacts to everybody else with coal generating power plants. I understand that it is not going away today, but there's enough possible belief with people in positions that may say, yeah, we are going to close it. We believe it's more of a threat to national security to have these things open, or to the environment, that they might just say, no, we're closing now, and you just have to deal with it. What I would like to know is, what are those things in the current legislation as it's written that would impact us? How would it impact us? And what can we definitively go to our legislators and say, we would like this to be changed. We would like this to be worked on, and at least get those things into the language for somebody that is speaking on our behalf to work for those things. Because if we just say, no, we don't want this, and we don't think, they may just say, sorry, you're not coming to the table.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I just want to say again, since I've been on the council for 12 years, I have always supported diversification. I've always supported sustainable building practices. I've always supported wind energy and solar energy. I built the first platinum LEED project in the city, in the country. It was a platinum LEED. I built the first one. So I fully support all this. But I just think the city of Batavia has a contract, and we've tried to get out of it. And I agree with what everyone has said. Absolutely. We need to get the facts down. We got, I believe, 4 new older people, 4 new city council members coming. They need to be brought up to speed. It's going to be difficult for them. There's a lot to wrap your head around, as Abby said. But we do have a contract, and we are going to be purchasing coal unless they shut down Prairie State. So our prayers should be, don't shut down Prairie State, and our actions with our representatives should be, don't shut down Prairie State until, we can get out of that contract. And you were here, Alan, when we tried to get out of it. We spent over $2 million trying to get out of it, and we couldn't get out. And we had some pretty sharp lawyers come in here and talk to us about that. And they went back and they studied every piece of document. And they studied it all, and they came back and said, we're really sorry, you guys don't have anything to do. You're in. For whoever drew up the contracts previously, maybe shame on them, but that's water under the bridge. And I don't mean to be a doom and gloom, but we are purchasing coal. And if we can do something to get out of it, that would be wonderful. But that is the deal. And if we're going to be paying twice, we need to be, like everyone has been saying, do what we can not to pay twice, or to do something to help our ratepayers, because it's going to be bloody. And as far as what Mark had said, the technology is not up there. I just read an article today in Clean Power, and what they said their issues is the technology is not there, and they don't have the land area for wind generation. It takes a lot of land area to put 10,000 wind facilities in, and throughout all the states in the Midwest, they're going out to the far west to generate that. They don't have it in the Midwest. That's just a fact. There's limited space. So, and I'm not, and they're the ones who want clean power, and they're saying this is what they're coming up against. So I don't think it's doom and gloom. I think there's hope there, but we should continue to review it and discuss it, and can come up with a second plan in case the seizure comes out and cuts our legs out from under us, so.
And I think we need to be, proactive in this, so whatever we can do to get those meetings set up, to get legislators here, and to get the groups that helped write the reports that we have available to us, so we can get direct input from them, look at our financials and try to figure out what kind of plans can we set up, plan A, B, and C, whatever it takes to be ready for whatever comes out of this. Because I think we're all in agreement that it's happening. It's just how soon is it gonna happen and how are we gonna do it? So I think we need to, have that stuff laid out in front of us. And then I know Gary's had plans before when we've changed members on the council, where we can throw together the gigantic volumes of information that got us to this point through Prairie State, what we've tried legally to get out of it, just all the background information to get to the new people on the council, so that way, right off the bat, they have that available, And I know everybody that I've talked to that's running knows that you got a ton to read, and this is an even bigger ton.
I think Abby has a hand up.
No. Abby, you have another comment?
Yeah, and you then touched on it. The, could we make an invite to our legislators to be there next week and then have the RMI folks there and have the discussion continue next Tuesday?
As long as they're available, we'll definitely.
Yeah,
out
and I mean,
invite
that's actually probably really good, because I don't know that we have a ton on the agenda for next week. So, this is one of our, 5 meeting,
Yes, fifth
the
Tuesday.
5th Tuesday, so.
Right.
We can, try and devote some real time to that, and I think it's really important that, we all, of course, take this seriously, but that we really focus on trying to get this done, whatever we do with it, that we get this out and then get it out to the public. Because I think, this is one of the biggest topics that's been discussed over the last 15 years, was our involvement in this, the problems of getting out of it, problems of having too much power, and where do we end up going with this? I mean, I think it's really important that the public knows what we're doing about this.
I might add, with Abby's point, to get the representatives here, if we can't do it on a Tuesday, it's a Wednesday that they can all be here, and we have a meeting on a Wednesday, another Cal meeting on a Wednesday. I mean, I'm not opposed to coming to accommodate them, if they're gonna come and accommodate us to talk to
A
us.
few more meetings for you and Marty.
Yeah. Thought I was done.
Yep.
Alan, I agree with you as well. I think we have to get the public behind us on this, because they are the ratepayers. And I think there's power in numbers.
Yeah.
And I think we have a lot of educated people in Batavia, and they would help us and
Well,
do
and with
whatever
that-
we need to do to make sure we're not paying twice.
Yeah, and with that thought, with, Mike and Marty leaving the council, it would also be my ask to them, if you can, spend some time with whoever replaces you and bring them up to speed on the things that they need to know, or if they have questions, if they can come to you to try, to get some answers. I think that would be really helpful. It's really kind of interesting too, when we were talking before the meeting about all the different races and everything that are going on within the Tri-City area, both school board, cities, and everything else. We really have never had animosity on the city council to where people wouldn't share information. So like, if you replace somebody that was here, you could go to the person you replaced and sit down and talk to them and get any and all information. I mean, I got a stack of stuff from, multiple people that were on the council when I started here, that, hey, these are all the things you need to learn about. We're gonna talk about this next week. And it was literally a stack about 6 inches high. I'm like, for next week? Is this a joke? And that's the reality, is we're willing to share that, and I think that's a good thing, because it helps transition go as good as it can. And I think, again, that's gonna be a big thing when we, switch out another side of the council.
Well, to your point, Alan, I think my last 12 years have been pretty collegial with all the council members, and the prior council members, former council members, they're still friends. I mean,
Yeah.
COVID is upon us, but,
Yeah.
Before COVID, we would get together.
Yeah.
The prior council members with present, and, I mean, it's, I think the mayor hits it all the time, that we work together. We have differences, absolutely, we have differences, but we try to do work together for the benefit of the people of Batavia, so.
2 hands up there. Tony?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I appreciate the discussion. It was a great discussion, and I think there's a lot of agreement. Two things being, we all realize that change is coming don't know if it's going to be tomorrow or 10, 15 years, but it's coming. And I think we all need to protect our constituents in Batavia so they don't get stuck holding the bag. And how we get there, I think, is key. First, making sure our voice is heard. I do believe we are a minority, but correct me if I'm wrong, Gary. What would you say the percentage of municipalities that have their own power utility is? And of those, obviously, those are fellow members of NIMPA, have the same concerns as we do. But those other municipalities that have their own utility, where are they under as big a threat as we are being a part of NIMPA?
So there's
And
go ahead.
and the last part of the question is, is there any conversations happening with some of those other groups? Because that might be an organizing point that we can start organizing with other municipalities that are going to get stuck holding the bag too, to be a larger voice.
So in total, there's around 50 municipal utilities in the state of Illinois. Geneseo and Springfield, to my knowledge, are the only independents. Obviously, Geneva, Rochelle, and Batavia are in NIMPA, and the rest of the municipals in Illinois are in the IMEA, the Illinois Municipal Electric Agency. So, and we have regular conversations with the IMEA. IMEA has a legislative liaison, Stacy Wilson. I talk with her, I don't mean literally every day, but constant communications with her. So yeah, we are in communication with the other municipalities. To answer the second part of your question, the IMEA is set up as a different type of agency than NIMPA is. So the IMEA is more of a everyone shares in the good and everyone shares in the bad type of agency. Everything's in a gigantic pot. Whereas Batavia and Geneva and Rochelle decided to establish what's called a project-based agency. And so if Geneva or Rochelle do something that would be on their own, they're independent from us, even though we're all together in one project. It's actually much more complicated than that, but it was my simplest way of trying to explain that. So I haven't answered your question yet. I am answering your question. Your question was, are we worse off than the other municipalities? Because the IMEA is more of a collective, more of a cooperative, even though that's a bad term to use, they're better off than we are because they have inherent portfolio diversity in what they have. Geneva and Rochelle have shares of Prairie State that they probably would say are too large, but they're still, by comparison's sake, much smaller than our share. And then we have our share, because they have diversity too. They have landfill gas, they have diesel generators, Geneva and Rochelle do. They have some other sources of generation. We have Prairie State. In fact, as Alderman O'Brien said earlier, we have more Prairie State than we need. So we have zero diversity, and that hopefully will answer your question that we are uniquely situated as probably being in the worst position.
Okay, that's not what I wanted to hear, but thank you, I appreciate that. That helps.
I will say that the IMUA, which is the legislative arm of IMEA, has been an incredible resource for us. And, they don't treat the City of Batavia Municipal Electric Utility any different than anyone else who is part of the IMUA. And this Alyssa is just fantastic at staying on top of this legislation as well. It's been a
So
great
we're not
resource.
alone, at least we have other people
Right.
who.
Right, yeah, we're members of
Yeah.
the IMUA. We're not members of the IMEA.
Right.
But the IMEA surely still has concerns with this legislation, just not as.
Absolutely.
Correct, yeah, they're also an owner of Prairie State, and that's a big part of their portfolio generation.
I don't think any municipal electric utility would be in favor of going under the ICC that is proposed in this legislation. For instance, that's something that uniformly all of us would be opposed to.
And I think that's true. That's one of the things that, as we form a position going forward on it, there will be items like that that will be, key points that this is what we're opposed to in this legislation. This is what we're opposed to. This we can live with, but these are ones we're opposed to. So
Right.
I think that'll all come together as we move forward.
So if you're really a glutton for punishment, you can dive into the line-by-line analysis and pick out those things. I've tried to do and pick out the big ones, which were the topics in brief, and then distill those even further into talking points. So that's what I've tried to get at, is those things that will impact us.
Alan?
Marty, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's what we need to do at this point, because I know I am talking with, with Leah, who is going to be replacing me on all of this. I'm actually pretty sure she's on the line,
Yes.
watching this tonight too, or at least she had planned to. And with that in mind, I'm trying to put myself in her position. If she was listening to this tonight and in about a month and a half is sitting in that seat trying to decide, for her, I think we need to lay out what are the issues in as simplistic form as possible. We are living with, all the Gary memos that we've received on this, the public doesn't have yet. And they don't know exactly what they're talking about. So we might be talking past a lot of people and talking past our residents to even understand what we're doing, because we have information, but we're not laying it out concisely and clearly. Point number one, our concern is this, just like Gary had said, and then be able to explain to the public, why is it a concern? That's what we should be doing for this meeting, and say, we have this issue is the concern. This issue is the concern. And then allow others to say why that is or isn't a concern for us. Because as I do see Bill Scown wrote in the side memo, he's from the Sierra Club. He had put that there are some misunderstandings that he's probably heard that we were saying tonight. And I do know the Sierra Club is eating, breathing, and digesting all of this information, and they are a resource that we should be utilizing to figure out, is our concerns well-founded? Are they not well-founded? If they are well-founded, is there a solution? That would be the productive way to kind of move forward, to be able to address our legislators and to have the public, like Nick said, the public support behind us, and be able to support our, for those of us that are leaving, our successors. So we don't just hand the bag and say, adios, have fun. So that's what I'm thinking.
Tony has his hand up.
Okay, Tony.
Just wanted to add in, last week it was 2 weeks ago now, the Batavia Environmental Commission Green Night Out, the movie. Gary, you did a fantastic job there, presenting some good factual information. I think that really is a start of a conversation. You can still watch that, I believe, on the Facebook page. So if you didn't get a chance to see it, if you go to the Batavia Environmental Commission, I think you can still view that Green Night Out at the movie.
That's correct.
Anybody else have any comments?
There are 6 attendees. I don't see anybody with their hand up at this point. Is there any members of the public who wanted to make comment? There's Bill Scone. Okay, you can unmute now.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so I work with the Clean Energy Committee. It's been drafting the bill, and with the folks that drafted the RMI report. And, yes, we would absolutely love to meet, with you, and if we can have our state representatives present at the same meeting, I think that would be very productive. I think we really need to have a dialogue, because I think there are some different understandings around some of these issues that we can discuss and figure out, and have a much more productive meeting and a good result. So, next week or the week after, I think would be great if we can pull the meeting together. We'll do everything we can to have the right people there.
Great, good deal. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
There are no other hands up.
So we'll get a hold of Bill Scown somehow if we get a meeting set up, right?
I don't have any contact information for him, but if somebody else does have contact information, then they could
Since
send
he's
to
on,
me.
we might ask him to send that to you.
Okay,
Yeah, send contact information to the city administrator. So
yes.
can make sure that he's included in that. I guess I'll just say I'm glad that we had a very productive conversation tonight about this. I think we got great ideas out there about where we want to go, and I think we've got a good plan to try to move this forward at quite, a pretty good pace so that we get something done from our end. And then, we have to keep a constant, open communication with the legislators, as this moves forward, whether it happens right away or not. So we need to make sure that we keep that open and we keep constantly have this, front burner. So we're talking about this so we know as things occur, so we're not reacting after something, all of a sudden pops up on the 6 o'clock news that, wow, this made it out of committee and it's on the floor and they're gonna vote on it tonight.
Well, they do sometimes do that at
Yeah,
4:15 in the morning.
Yeah, I know, they like to stay up till 3
I
o'clock
can't
in the
keep
morning.
track of them
But
between
that's
midnight
usually
and 5.
that they haven't read that they're gonna vote on.
Right, right.
This one, honestly, from the stuff that I've read media-wise on this has been really beaten to death in a bunch of different places along the way to try to get to where it is. And I think now, because of the form that it's in and where it's at, the rest of the world is really taking notice of this. And, the public wants to see this. I think we agree, we want to see change in, the portfolio. So I think it's something that it's the right time to do this. It's just, how do we make it happen? And how does it affect us? So I'm glad we had a really good discussion tonight, and now we can move on to project status.
Okay. Get my glasses off so that I can read this. We have been meeting with property owners and businesses in both the areas of the South Water Street outdoor dining area, and then also today we had a meeting with the same type of individuals on North River Street to discuss how those areas will be arranged and what different types of programming will be at those places. And I think that we're kind of coming to a place now where they'll be complementary to one another. I think that, we had concerns initially that we didn't want those two areas to compete with one another, and the dialogue is really moving in that direction to where the two areas will coordinate with one another to make sure that there is always something fun going on in downtown Batavia in those areas. So they're doing some really great and innovative things. Finance, as we're taking a look at our 2020 numbers and some of the revenue totals that came in, I thought you'd be interested to know that the booked accrual for gasoline tax, our revenues were about $130,000 less than 2019 revenues, and we can attribute that to certainly there was much less driving that was done in 2020. Now, as people begin to travel again, perhaps we'll see an uptick in that as people may prefer driving to be a safer mode of transportation than air travel. But time will tell on that. On our liquor tax, it was actually ended up slightly higher in 2019, so we didn't see any loss of revenue there. And sales tax came in $155,000 less, which I can tell you that that is far less than what we were expecting to see at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. In community and economic development, the economic development manager position has been advertised, and applications are due April 2nd. So we have had several applications for that position. The Historic Preservation Commission met on Monday and reviewed a certificate of appropriateness for the demolition of a house at 14 North Washington Avenue. It's adjacent to the Barco Products building, and that was approved for demolition. We anticipate the full Menards building permit, including the new detention basin on the south side of McKee Street, will be issued next week. And then also, our contractor that does the prescribed burning of the Brayburn Marsh had been planning for the last couple of weeks to do that prescribed burn and had sent out notice to all of the residents in that area so that they had plenty of notice that that was going to be coming. But Andrea Pedraza, our engineer, on Friday picked up the phone and made a very alert and astute observation that maybe we don't want to have prescribed burning being done while we have hundreds of people showing up for COVID vaccines at the Sam's Club, which is right next to where that burning would be done. So kudos to her for pointing that out. As of this time, Kane County said that they will be closed on Mondays. And so we have worked with our contractor to make sure that when we do the prescribed burn, it will be when the mass vaccination site is closed. And that's all I have unless anybody has any questions for me.
I actually have a question about that area. How has that gone traffic-wise and implementation-wise since it started last week?
It is smooth sailing so far. We had at first had concerns that because the vaccination would be open to anyone in the state of Illinois, that we would have people that may have shown up from driving long distance, just to hope that there was vaccine available at the site. But so far that has not come to pass, and it's just, those who actually have their have signed up online for vaccinations. It's sort of low volume at this point. The first couple of days were just people who were coming for their second dose. Now first doses have started over this past weekend, but the availability of the vaccine is really the pinch point here. But we have heard from Kane County that they anticipate that, and what they've heard at the state level is that that should be changing here in the next couple of weeks, and that they should be able to do thousands of doses per day at this site.
Okay, I just wanted to check on that because to me, I just, test driving, going off there and looking, it looks like it's just a fairly heavy shopping day is all.
Right.
It doesn't look crazy, so.
Right.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, the police report back that there haven't been any problems, no sort of backups that lead out into any roadways or anything of that nature.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for Mike?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that. We had our vaccine today. We got our first shot. And the day the vaccination center opened up on Friday, we received an email that we were eligible for the shot. Since we registered, please set up your appointment online, and we were able to set it up today.
Right.
And I'll tell you what, kudos to everybody there because it went so smoothly.
Excellent.
And they had a lot in people there. I
Yes.
mean, I was surprised at how many people were there and how quickly they funneled everybody through. And the National Guard out there helping in that. I'll tell you, I was proud that I was from Batavia.
Yes, yes.
So anybody that hasn't had their vaccination and wants to get it, I mean, that was smooth sailing over there.
Yeah, our HR director, her husband got his vaccination on Saturday, and she said he wasn't gone from the house for 20 minutes.
Right.
Wow.
That's how quickly
Yeah.
the turnaround time was.
It's well-staffed, and
Yes.
they really they're set up to move people through.
Yes.
Nurses and military, they get
Yeah.
things
Mhm.
done.
Yeah.
And they don't want to waste time doing it. Okay, anybody
Laura?
else? Anybody online?
Alderman Callahan?
Yeah, what's the date for those that currently aren't eligible?
Okay, so on Monday, government employees became eligible. On the 29th, restaurant workers will become eligible. And on April 12th, age 16 and above will all be eligible. There is one, I want to say it's the Pfizer vaccine, that you have to be 18 years old to receive the Pfizer vaccine, I believe. And so, yeah, that's the only drawback.
Are they doing the Johnson & Johnson one there too? That's the single
Yes.
one, right?
Yes, yes. They will eventually be receiving the Johnson & Johnson shot as well, and that will rapidly increase the number of individuals that can be vaccinated, since it is just a single dose and a single appointment.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Sure. just had a report from Michael Isaacson this morning at our Rotary Club meeting.
Abby,
Ellen?
go ahead.
I have a question, Laura, about, or I guess in general to folks about the property next to Barco Products that's slated to be taken down. Was that a designated historic home by the Historic Preservation Commission?
You know, I wish that Scott Buning were still on the phone here.
I'm on.
I can get.
I'm actually on.
He's here.
Oh, you
I'm
are?
here too.
Okay.
I'm actually here too.
Hi, Jeff.
Oh,
If either
Was
of you
that-
could answer the question.
Yeah, that house is considered contributing, and they didn't actually vote on it last night. It's a 2-meeting component that they have to do, so they have not actually voted on demolition yet. That would come at a subsequent meeting.
Okay. I guess it was just, I know that we just went through the whole historic preservation process discussion on, you know, and when homeowners don't want to be, they don't want to be considered historic because when they want to make improvements to their buildings, then they see it as a roadblock. But then if a building already is considered historic and contributing, it's left in disrepair for so long, and there's no stick, you know, like the carrot and the stick, there's no incentive or disincentive for them to keep it in good repair, but then our process makes it harder and disincentivizes other people from designating their homes, because when they want to make repairs, when they want to make improvements, then it's harder for them. Like the whole thing is just like jumbled in my brain on how exactly it's meant to work and how it should work. And I'm really sad to see a historic house go. I'm sad to see a prime spot in, you know, downtown Batavia real estate be converted to a parking lot. This whole thing makes me really sad.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I mean, there's a multi-step process that comes into play with demolition. So, you know, the Historic Preservation Commission is a 2-meeting step for this type of a house or building. So the first meeting that they had was on Monday, where they gathered information, and then they would have another meeting in April where they would then vote on a recommendation on whether or not to approve of the certificate of appropriateness for demolition. That, as a demolition, then goes to the city council for an actual vote. I will say, and I'm just going to be brutally honest, the property owner has essentially done demolition by neglect, because they have not maintained that property since they bought it in 2014. They had the intentions to use it as a parking lot. They indicated that at the Historic Preservation meeting on Monday. So, you know, I think their intentions were never to save that building, and were always to take it down.
And so if we have designations and standards in place for historic buildings, especially in our downtown, you know, what teeth does it have? Like what mechanisms do we have as a city to ensure that properties are being maintained and can't?
Well, we would cite it for, you know, code violations, which is where we were going with it. You know, once we had the complaint regarding that, you know, we were going down that road of you know, citing them for violations, but then they filed this certificate of appropriateness to demo the building. So, you know, just like some other buildings in downtown, I mean, we've been focusing mostly on the historic limestone buildings, and we haven't really focused on other buildings necessarily, but when we get complaints about them, we do follow up on them. So that's kind of where we were going with this. We were going to start following up on it. They decided you know, instead of fixing it, they wanted to demo it, so they filed the COA.
Yeah, and I believe, because I've spoken with the owner, I believe this house was bought pretty much in the condition it is, and really just left it alone because they were anticipating taking it down from the day they bought it, because the house was in horrible shape to start with. And I don't know if there was a talk that, depending on how imminent the need was for the parking lot space for the business, that it may end up being basically a park for that building next door until they need the parking space. So I'm not really sure exactly how quick the parking lot would go in there. It may just get grassed over and extend the fence that's around the Barco building until they need the parking space.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to plan to put the parking in immediately at this
Right.
point, because they don't really need it. But eventually, if there's demand for it, then they would, you know, use that space for parking.
And if they don't need the parking space, I could always see that being added to another piece of property that's adjacent to it in that same block that could become a nice development spot. Okay. Any other
So
questions?
in any event, it's gonna come back to the city council, if they recommend for demolition, it'll come to you for a, final vote on it.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else with any others?
Alan?
Go ahead,
Under
Marty. Go ahead.
In light of a lot of the recent news articles about Chicago area lead in the water, do we have anything that we can put out to the public, be proactive and detail some of the measures that we've put in place?
Isn't there
Yes.
an item on the website already about the grant or the
Yeah,
the
we're
lead
actively,
service?
and have been actively soliciting property owners to survey their water service lines to see if they're lead or see if they're galvanized or copper. And so, yeah, we have been reaching out literally to every single property that's a candidate to have a lead service. And by that, I mean the age of the home.
Right.
And every property in town will be surveyed. That's in anticipation hopefully of getting that grant from the state, which would allow us to replace lead services at no cost. So that's an
Right. And yeah, no, and I understand that that's going on, but probably something in the way of a communication in response to, because I know some of my neighbors are talking about, we're seeing some of this stuff about water in the lead and lead in the system in the Chicago area is greater than Flint, and what does that mean? And I'm just saying that we ought to probably put something out about the safety of the water, that there are issues, in what's being addressed on those, the water is safe to drink, et cetera. Here's what we do, just to alleviate some concerns that I know that is out there.
And we do an annual water report. What is that coming up soon?
the water confidence report. And there's zero lead in our public water supply.
Yeah.
We don't have lead in our water supply. Lead gets absorbed into the water through individual plumbing. So it's through that service line. And
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's why I'm saying just kind of timely, proactively get out there and say, there's a lot of recent news reports about this, but it is not of concern to us, just as maybe a Facebook post or just some communication out to the public.
And we could link it if you go onto our website and just punch the simple word lead into it. The first thing that comes up is lead in drinking water. It's from 2019.
Right.
And it's a whole list, exactly what Gary was just starting to explain, that it's not actually in our water. It gets leached out of what's in the house or the services leading to it. So maybe it's a good idea, put Griffin on that, get that back out, get it in an email blast and get it in, with our plan.
that's how it got there the first time. So it's been 2 years now. It'd be good to.
It'd be a good idea, especially like Marty brings up, that, if it's out in the public, we should talk about what our plan is and what we've got there, so.
Very good.
Good idea.
Yeah, just so it doesn't turn into more concern and anxiety over it than is necessary. There's enough anxiety right now in the world.
Yeah, we don't need any more.
Now, and one thing, just kind of going off, but I just want to say for the record, in the past 2 weeks, we've had some extraordinary violence perpetrated against innocent people again. And flags at half-staff. I just hope and pray our federal government, they legislate some reasonable gun control. And we start putting more money back into mental health facilities and issues to try to get a handle on what's going on out there. But the whole country's in mourning, and I don't know what it's going to take for us all just to be so sick of it that something happens to keep it from happening again.
Okay, well, I'll add my other on a much lighter note. This Friday, after a year and a half, BATV actually gets to broadcast another football game. So check the website at mybatv.com or our YouTube page at BATV 1017. or on Facebook, look up BATV. I don't have the exact specifics because I don't know that we have the exact starting time. I think it's going to be either 5 or 5:30 that BATV will go live, because I don't believe there's going to be really much room in the stadium, because I think they're only limiting it to parents and, the cheer team and a couple other things. I think that's about it. I'm not even sure if we're going to be in the press box or if we're going to be back in the studio in the high school calling the game from inside the building. I'm not really sure how we're working the logistics out on that yet, but it is going to happen. So you'll get to see the best team in the state play on Friday night on BATV. And I'm talking about Batavia, not about St. Charles North. So,
And it'll be a little strange, because at this time of year, even though they're starting at nighttime,
Yeah.
they'll probably play in the daylight the whole time.
Yeah,
It's still sunny until 7:30.
well, we had running clock last week in at St. Charles East, so
Yeah.
it was an incredible game. This team is for real. They are a very good team. It's really kind of frustrating that we don't have a state tournament, because I think they would definitely be the top team. We'll see after Friday night how it happens.
Awesome.
I
Look
just have
forward
one
to
thing,
that.
Alan.
Go ahead.
I wasn't here for the conversation regarding Water Street or River Street, but Gary, thank you for sending that information over. After taking a look at it, I think we actually have some opportunities to really improve the downtown area, implement some calming opportunities, especially as we do some development down here. So I looked at that and I was like, oh, wait, I think we have some real great opportunities. I also talked to John from the Biking Commission, and there's the opportunity to connect the trail for that, so we can hit a number of items that we continue to talk about, and we can punch that by really taking a look at that and extending it up to Washington. So thank you for sending that along.
You're welcome.
Okay, anybody else? If not,
I move we adjourn.
all right. Second. Motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. We got out of here early.